Welcome to the National Center for Victims of Crime two-part video series on the intersection of domestic violence and incarceration. This video will include foundational information on intimate partner violence, as well as include the voices of those with lived experiences. In this video, we're going to hear from Jason. Jason shares his story of trauma, incarceration, and resilience. This video project is funded by a grant from the MacArthur Foundation through their Safety and Justice Challenge, a nationwide effort to reduce populations and eliminate racial and ethnic disparities within jails. We'd like to thank the Foundation for their continued support of our work on this project. We would also like to thank Jason for sharing his story with us and being such a strong advocate for survivors. Please be advised that this video contains descriptions of violence and trauma. Be sure to take care of yourself during and after listening to this session. If you need assistance after this video, please reach out to Victim Connect to receive support. Domestic violence, as defined in our first video of this series, is defined by the National Domestic Violence Hotline as a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. In this video, we will discuss the impacts of exposure to domestic violence on children. While not the primary victim, a child witnessing domestic violence perpetrated against their parent or caregiver can experience lasting impacts into their life. Exposure to domestic violence is considered an adverse childhood experience, or ACE. ACEs can cause toxic stress to occur and can lead to long-term issues, both behavioral and medical. Children who witness violence between parents may also be at a greater risk of being violent in their future relationship. Regardless of age, children exposed to violence may experience fear, anxiety, and may be on guard and have heightened flight or freeze reactions because they may not know when the next violent event may happen. Jason's first memory is one of extreme trauma. Let's listen to his story.
Well, my first memory is when my mom was killed. So I was four years old. Yeah, it was domestic violence. She got beat to death. So, and I have two little brothers, so I remember them screaming in the back. One was 2 and one was a month old, Christopher. We call him Topher. And Eddie was 2, and then I was 4. And that was 1980, so a long time ago. Yeah, that's my first memory, and oddly enough, just thinking about it, doesn't seem that far away.
ACEs, like Jason's experience seeing his mother killed, are extremely common in individuals who are currently or formerly incarcerated. According to the Compassion Prison Project, 97% of the prison population has at least one ACE, compared to 64% of the general US population. 35% of men who are incarcerated have experienced domestic violence, compared to 17% of the general population. Jason, like many children who are survivors of violence, went into the foster care system. Here, he shares more about this experience.
So by the time I was 10 or 11, I went into the foster system. And I stayed in. I have never not been a state ward, I don't think, since then. So I stayed in the foster system. They separated us. My little brother, my youngest brother, stayed with my aunt and uncle. And I was moved around here in Nebraska. I'm in Nebraska, into small towns outside of the city. And I think maybe the first time I ever spoke about it, because everybody used to just ask, adults or kids would ask where my parents was, and maybe I was in 5th or 6th grade, and my friend's mom asked once, and I was just standing there, and I remember I just finally just told her my mom was murdered, and I don't think I've ever had to answer a question in that town again because nobody ever said nothing, but everybody looked at me different. So I don't know.
Children respond differently to exposures to trauma and abuse. Children may show signs of resilience, sensitivity, and more. It is important that children who have witnessed or experienced violence have a good support system with adults who they can trust, build boundaries that are safe for them, and develop healthy relationships. While services for trauma, in this case, exposure to domestic violence, are sorely needed within carceral institutions, they are rarely provided. And when and if they are provided, may be underfunded, understaffed, or inefficient. Listen to Jason talk about what he was offered during his incarceration.
As far as change in the prison system, I mean, as far as stuff they offered in the prison, they always offer some sort of programs. Uh, Anger management, you always hear about anger management. Um, what were some of the programs they had? GED, which is probably one of the best because that really transfers with people, and it can stick to people because when you learn to read and start reading books that educate yourself, that's the best course you can hand somebody, is the ability to understand and realize that you can educate yourself, in my opinion. But a lot of the institutional programs they gave you to get parole or to get your good time were pretty much just cookie cutter. You went through them and nobody really got much until this is what happened for me. And it took many years, and there's a lot of story in between, but until there's a big change in your life. And some people just get quiet and just kind of sneak their way out of the prison. And then some people get active in their involvement in themselves. Like, so they'll have clubs that are ran by other guys locked up. And these clubs will all of them are educational or culture, but cultural ones are educational ones as well. There's no such thing as a cultural club that doesn't educate you. And in them, you get some sense of self-worth, self-purpose, and you are voluntarily doing all this. And there's a much drastic difference in voluntarily taking steps in your life than if you're doing it to get parole or whatever, or to fulfill somebody else's obligation. And a lot of them fellas, long time work. And I don't even think they like actively like were deliberately trying to work on me. They just treated me like a person, so that long term, by the time they started getting things in my head of different thinking patterns, I already had respect for them. I already was comfortable around them. You know, they weren't the preaching guys. They were just other brothers in there. They just lived different. They didn't try to be gangbangers. They weren't trying to keep up a rep, and they weren't trying to do, you know, they didn't think their old life was worth bragging to try to maintain whatever status they might have. They just, you know, just talked about the power of changing, the change in their life. You know, some of them, you know, on cultural, some of them on their faith, and but most of them on educational type stuff, you know, what they are learning recently or whatnot.
What can we do to help people with trauma histories who are incarcerated? Jason shares his thoughts.
And so, for one, as far as the prison system, actively having not just the caseworker that just runs cases inside, but somebody that tries to reach out to these organizations, connects somebody coming out, knows kind of not just the prison history of this individual, but like, well, we know like he lacks family support. We've seen a lot of this sort of trauma in our interactions. So maybe some people go on medications first doing something that we have that set up so that they're not out there trying to find either Medicaid or Medicare or whatever it is that would pay for thousands of dollars of meds, because these medications often cost so much, but they tend to come out with a care package that would last a couple months. Why we connect you with the individuals that will help you on the benefits, will help you with housing, and somebody or more than somebody that's there to kind of walk with you. You can call and whatnot. And that's where, so I work with organizations. We have peers like people who've been to prison, people who've been through addiction or whatnot. And then we get training, and, of course, it's not just pulling people out of that life and saying, hey, work with us, but you get training on how to make sure you're using these lived experience not to re-traumatize people, maybe. If I'm not coming to meet people so I can tell them my story, I'm coming to meet people because I've been through something pretty deep and dark, and maybe we can connect on that, but it ain't so much that we need to connect because we've both been to prison. It's more a connect that I've been through something, and I still sometimes deal with it, but I am dealing with it. And maybe we can connect on that similar thing of like, we've been through something. How can I help you? How can I assist you is more of the causes, because we try not to do for you. We try to help you along the way, in the way that, hey, you got a few questions, we talk about it. We're looking for resources. You can't find the resources. Maybe we can find one and connect you with that so you can put them steps into place in your life. And that at any point that I disappear, you're like, I already know some steps, because when he came in, he was showing me this and I did this. I didn't get showed and then he did it for me while I was watching. He walked with me, or she, or whoever it is. But somebody that's been through it has more power in your life when it comes to assisting you on trying to move forward than somebody that you just, and even if it's a mistaken thing, but you just feel like they just haven't been through nothing like this. They haven't been through nothing as deep and as dark as this. And now they're trying to, dictate my life, even when they're doing good for you. There's just something about somebody that's been through it that can actively come into your life and be a part of that. And the system has always been set up to take a couple people that have been through it and say, hey, this guy brought this program about gangs and changing your life, and we're going to share this program, and he'll talk to you and then he'll go on his way. As opposed to, we don't call them counselors, but we'll just use the words. Let's say you have some counselor that's been incarcerated, that's been through addiction, that's been through domestic violence situations, and they're coming into your life and you've been through things like this. And it's not just somebody there that's got an education is preaching to you or not, or writing down notes. It's somebody there you're thinking, that if they want to share, they might, and you just get an experience of knowing like, hey, other people been through this and they're here helping me. And plus I can look at you and say, you know what, I get myself back on right, maybe I can do what you're doing.
Thank you so much for joining us for this two-part video series on domestic violence and incarceration. For more information about NCVC's work, please visit victimcenteredreform.org.